Howdy folks, and welcome at long last to another actual proper episode of Mingles with Jingles. You know, I was feeling kind of bummed out this week, and then right before I sat down to record this episode, I read something that made me laugh. I mean, like bust a gut, laugh out loud. I was having a look at the gaming news on PC Gamer's website, and there's a quote here from Bethesda Game Studios executive producer Todd Howard, talking about the development of Fallout 76. He said, Sorry, I know what's coming. He said, and I quote, "We had a lot of difficulties during development, and sometimes those difficulties do show up on the screen." Really? It's okay, Todd. I don't think anyone noticed. I'm sorry, but you're going to have to give me a minute here. That really cheered me up. Anyway, give me a second to work this out in my system, and we'll move along swiftly. Right, okay. Next, also, while browsing the PC Gamer website, I heard something that was very, very less funny. A man responsible for the fatal 2017 swatting sentenced to 20 years in jail. What the hell is swatting, and why can you get 20 years in jail for it? This is apparently a thing. I'd never heard of it. I had to go and look it up. Swatting is the practice of hoaxing an emergency call in order to get large numbers of armed federal agents or police sent to somebody's address. Apparently, we now live in a world where this sort of thing happens so often that they've had to come up with a name for it. If you thought being unfriended on Facebook was bad, you ain't heard nothing yet. Here's the report from the PC Gamer website. I thought I'd get this in now while I still can before Article 13 and Article 11 mean I have to pay somebody for the privilege of repeating a news story, but yeah. The man who instigated the 2017 swatting that resulted in the death of a bystander at the hands of police has been sentenced to 20 years in prison. The sentence is double that of the 10 years recommended by guidelines. According to this AP report, AP standing for Associated Press, but was handed down as part of a deal in which 26-year-old Tyler Barris pleaded guilty to 51 federal charges related to fake calls and threats. The charges against Barris followed the death of 28-year-old Andrew Finch, who was shot by police responding to a call claiming that someone at Finch's address had killed one person and was holding others hostage. That call was placed by Barris, allegedly at the behest of 19-year-old Casey Viner, who was embroiled in a dispute over a Call of Duty World War II match with 20-year-old Shane Gaskell. When Gaskell discovered that Barris was trying to track him down, he provided an old address, Finch's, and dared him to do something. So the guy who got shot and killed by the police, Finch, had absolutely nothing to do with any of this. He just had the misfortune of living at an address that Gaskell used to live at. So Finch had nothing to do with it. And up until this point, Bayliss, the one who's actually been sentenced to 20 years in prison, has nothing to do with it. The argument, if you can believe this, between Gaskell and Viner was over a $1.50 bet in Call of Duty World War II. It's at this point where Bayliss gets involved. Apparently he'd made something of a name for himself on Twitter, of all places, as somebody who's really good at this swatting hoax thing. Remember, he pleaded guilty to 51 charges, not just one, 51. In 2017, just as one example, 3 other gamers scattered all across America hired him. One of them actually stole credit cards in order to buy clothing for Bayliss in order to pay him to, wait for it, call in 2 phony bomb threats to a high school in Illinois. While on the phone, he told the police that he'd left explosives in a classroom, was high on meth, and was thinking about shooting teachers and students. Later that year, he did a similar bomb threat thing to shut down a gaming convention in Dallas. Now, the Department of Justice indictments didn't specify exactly which gaming convention got hit, but apparently there's a social media star called Saw Astronova. Never heard of her. But she was attending a major Call of Duty tournament at the Dallas Convention Center at about the right time, and tweeted about the confusion that she felt as she fled the event beneath the whir of police helicopters. And Barris taunted her from one of his Twitter accounts, saying, "It got ran, baby girl. That's what happens." His Twitter name? You're not going to believe this. Swartistic. Yeah, really. So he's doing 20 years in jail. Now, as for the other two, Casey Viner, who put this Bayliss character up to the whole thing in the first place, remember, over a $1.50 bet in Call of Duty World War II, he's been arrested and is also facing charges. And Gaskill, the other guy involved in the argument, who provided the false address that led to this completely innocent Finch guy getting shot by police in his own home, he's also facing some hefty charges and is looking at a long time in jail. Even longer because he couldn't just keep his mouth shut. You won't believe this. After the fatal shooting, he went online and basically taunted Bayliss, saying words to the effect of, "Haha, you missed. Try again." A man has just been shot and killed by the police in his own home because you gave somebody his address and goaded them into doing their worst. And then after that happened, your response was to tell them to try again. Holy shit, man. And as for Finch, the poor guy who got shot and killed, 28-year-old father of two, he was killed by a single bullet fired by a Wichita Police Department officer, not a SWAT member. None of these police officers were trained in tactics or hostage situations or anything like that. They were just regular peace officers. Turned up in response to the call, surrounded the house, and were about to call inside for the guilty parties, even though there weren't any guilty parties because it was a hoax call, to come out with their hands up, when, according to Andrew Finch's mother, who was present at the time, he thought he heard something outside, so he went to the door and opened it. At that point, the police yelled, "Wichita Police Department, let me see your hands." And he started to raise his hands, and then he just kind of froze, presumably in panic. At which point, a police officer shot him through the heart and lung and killed him. Apparently, standing perfectly still, doing absolutely nothing, is now a capital offence in Wichita. So, there's that. Unsurprisingly, all of the police body cam footage that was available got edited down to a mere 7 seconds that didn't show anything conclusive, and the officer that fired the fatal shot initially claimed that Finch was reaching for a weapon in his waistband, and then later on changed his testimony to say that he just kind of moved his hands a bit. Nearly a week after the fatal shooting, Andrew Finch's mother still hadn't seen her son's body. The Wichita Police Department still hadn't even identified the officer who made the fatal shot, and they still hadn't returned 2 cell phones and a computer which had been seized by the police as evidence. To this date, no members of the Wichita Police Department are facing suspension, investigation, disciplinary or criminal charges for the murder of Thomas Finch for the crime of standing still and doing absolutely nothing. But, well, at least Bayliss is going away for 20 years. And hopefully Gaskill and Viner as well. And up until now, I thought the worst thing that could possibly happen to you for being a dick in an online game was that you might get added to somebody's blacklist. They might unfriend you on Facebook. Holy shit. I mean, you hear reports of people getting upset online and then tracking down and attacking or killing the person who upset them. And you think, whoa. Because it's so extreme and ridiculous and unheard of, because it happens so infrequently that it makes the news. But it doesn't happen infrequently. And I don't know why we should really be surprised that it happens as often as it does. I mean, it's happening so often in the USA that they actually have a legal term for it now, swatting. But just think about this for a second. I mean, take a deep breath, calm down, step back, tune out all of the bullshit and just take a fresh look at what is actually happening here. People are coming into contact with each other, deciding they don't like each other very much, and are looking for ways to hurt each other. The only real difference is that it's not happening in person. It's happening online. That's the only new thing here. And it's not even that new. I can remember back in the dawn of the internet, we had these things called news groups. Some of you kids might have to go and look that term up. But the best way to understand it, it's kind of like a prehistoric version of Reddit. Just to give you an idea of how they kind of worked, and also just how incredibly toxic they can be. And I can quite clearly remember to this day, there was one particular news group that I frequented, and the most prolific poster was a guy called Wes. I don't know what his real name was, but that was the handle he used. And it was not possible to win an argument with this guy. It didn't matter how wrong he was, he would just wear you down. Because let's face it, that's what the internet's for, isn't it? Arguing with people. Wes didn't appear to need to eat, sleep, or go to the bathroom. It was as if his sole reason for existing, the reason he was put on this planet, was to just argue with people on the internet. And he would, I'm sure you'd recognise the type. He was obviously highly intelligent. His posts were always very, very well thought out, but it was like the only social skill he possessed was the ability to be sarcastic, smug, and arrogant. Technically, that's 3. I'm sure you recognise the type. Wes's only ambition in life was to be right about everything, and make sure that as many people as possible, on his own little tiny corner of the internet, knew it. I don't even think Wes was being a troll. I mean, trolls get a lot of bad press, mostly because there are a lot of bad trolls out there. A good troll is worth their weight in gold. I mean, seriously, trolling is an art form. There are just so few people who are actually any good at it. Wes could have been the world's greatest troll. I may be completely underestimating this guy. It could be that he was just trolling everybody on the alt.Star Wars news group, and we didn't realise. But I genuinely believe that Wes just thought he was correcting everybody. I may be wrong, but I cannot tell you how many times I just wanted to reach through my monitor and strangle him. Because he was like a dog with a bone. Even, it didn't matter that you could categorically prove that what he was saying was wrong. You could provide links to evidence. It didn't matter. Wes would just never give up. He would argue his corner day and night while being as smug, arrogant, and condescending as he possibly could, until he basically just wore everybody down and we gave up. At which point, Wes would just declare himself the winner of the argument. He believed that he'd proved his point, because nobody else was prepared to put themselves through the emotional ringer of arguing with him anymore. So, why am I telling you about any of this ancient history? Well, first, hopefully, it's been an amusing story. Secondly, I hope you can identify with it, either as, well, hopefully not as Wes, but as somebody arguing with somebody like Wes online. You can see how easy it is to get upset with people when you're online. So much of our social presence is online these days rather than in person the way it used to be. It seems like it's a stupid thing to get upset about. But it's just a different way of interacting socially. You know, it's no more silly to get upset about an online argument than it is to get upset about an argument in person. That's the way people interact with each other these days. The only thing that's really new here is that, well, until very recently at least, the worst thing that you could reasonably expect to happen to you as a result of an online dispute was you might get kicked off a server, or if somebody found out what your actual email address was, you might find yourself getting added to all kinds of extremely suspect and dodgy mailing lists. But other than that, you didn't really have an awful lot to worry about. Well, I guess that's all changed. Well, anyway, change of subject time, although we're still kind of talking about prehistoric games here. This week, possibly earlier, but this week I noticed that Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2 was available to pre-order. Not just on Steam. It seems to be the fashion these days that certain developers and publishers just don't want to let anybody but themselves sell you their games. There have been a number of recent releases that were exclusive to the Epic Store, that were exclusive to the Ubisoft Store. Well, that's not happening with this one. You're going to be able to buy it on Steam, Paradox's own website, the Epic Store, Good Old Games. It's going to be on PS4 and Xbox One, whatever. But I actually got quite excited because way back in 2004, 15 years ago, I played the original Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. Or at least I tried to. It's probably safe to say that it was shipped incomplete. And that's being generous. The game was just broken. It just didn't work in any number of different ways. However, the community that sprang up around the game was passionate about it. And basically fixed it for themselves. There was a huge fan-made patch that fixed almost everything that was broken with the game, as a result of which the game actually became playable, and it was absolutely fantastic. It's one of those gaming experiences, along with The Secret of Monkey Island, along with the very first Civilization, along with X-Wing. These games that I look back on with great fondness, and they're doing a sequel, and you can pre-order it right now. So I got very excited. Not too excited, I've been burned before, but I went to have a look at the Steam page, and yep, whoa, hang on a second, it's coming out in March. That's like this month, or if you're watching this video on the day it was released, that's last month. Wow, I didn't miss it, did I? It hasn't already been... No, it hadn't. No, this game is in fact coming out. Or it's planned to come out in March 2020. Yes. It's not due out for another year, and they're already selling pre-orders. And you'd better believe there are multiple different ways to buy this game that isn't actually guaranteed to come out at all because, well, shit happens. You can buy the standard edition. It's all starting to sound very familiar, isn't it? And apparently, you won't believe this, there's also Day 1 DLC. Or to put it another way, stuff that got stripped out to be sold separately on release day. Oh, it's almost as if we've had this conversation before. And yet, the thing is, I'll probably get it anyway. And I'll probably be disappointed because it's never going to be able to live up to its predecessor. I don't care how good it is. The first game, bugged and broken though it was, once patched, it was the first time I can remember ever playing a game that treated you like an adult. And don't forget, this was back in 2004. This was 15 years ago, when games were very much still seen as, children's entertainment. At the very best, the kind of things enjoyed by teenagers wasting their time. That wasn't really the case, of course, even back in 2004, because games were being played by people in their mid-30s, people who'd been playing 8-bit games back on the ZX Spectrum and the Commodore 64 in the 80s. So the gaming audience had matured, even if the perception of the gaming audience hadn't. I mean, you could argue that we still have that problem today, although, we probably do, but dramatically less so. And so it was quite a revelation for a games publisher to take its audience seriously. And the game definitely dealt with some really dark issues. I did a casual Saturday video on Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice ages ago, which at the time, I'm not 100% sure, but I think I can remember saying that it was the first time I'd seen a game that treated issues of mental illness seriously. But that's not true, because Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines did it back in 2004. There were certain characters that you would interact with who were seriously damaged. And because it was 2004 and you just weren't used to dealing with that kind of thing in a computer game, and still wouldn't be 15 years later, when it was revealed that the people that you thought you knew were not actually the people that you thought they were, it really kind of pulled the rug out from under your feet. It was a breathtakingly good game. And I'm under no illusions that the sequel is going to be anywhere near as good. Or even if it is nearly as good, it's never going to be able to beat the nostalgia that people that played the original game have for it, the reverence in which the original game is held, purely by virtue of it at least trying to do so many bold things that had really never been done before in a computer game. I've got no doubt that Paradox Interactive are hoping to trade off the hype associated with the original game. The original game is, by the way, still available on Steam, and it does include the community patch. However, word of warning, the community patch for the game did not fix all of the bugs. Almost all of the bugs, but not all of them. There are still certain game-breaking bugs in there. But it's a mark of how good this original game was, that if you look at the reviews on Steam, overwhelmingly positive, and the very first negative review that I saw of the original Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines was talking about how fantastic the game was, how utterly immersive it was, right up until the point where he ran into one of these very rare, still existing game-breaking bugs that just completely halted his progress and he couldn't find a workaround, and that's why he gave the game the negative review. Not that it was a bad game, but some of those bugs are still around 15 years later. Anyway, it's still available on Steam, and a couple of outstanding game-breaking bugs notwithstanding, I would still recommend anybody to go ahead and play it. As for the sequel, I hope it's going to be good. I mean, it doesn't have to be fantastic, it doesn't have to be great. I'll just settle for a good sequel to the original game. As for whether or not I'm excited enough about it to exercise one of the 3 different ways that I can throw money at Paradox Interactive a year before the game's even released, yeah, I don't think so. I think I'm just going to bide my time. I think I'll just wait a year, see if the game actually gets released, and then wait a few weeks more and see what Zero Punctuation, Jim Sterling, maybe Rock Paper Shotgun have to say about it. And then I'll think about throwing money at Paradox Interactive. And I'd recommend everybody else do the same. Or at least spend part of the next year while you're waiting for the sequel to come out to try the original and just see exactly what it is that you might want to start getting just a little bit excited about. I really hope this doesn't come out at the same time as Cyberpunk 2077. Well, if it does, I know which I'm going to be playing, and it's probably not going to be Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2, because CD Projekt Red for the win, and also Cyberpunk is awesome. So, yeah, we've all got that to look forward to, or at least I do. You never know, I might even finish the Red Dead Redemption playthrough in time to start Cyberpunk 2077. I have actually finished Red Dead Redemption 2, by the way, or I finished the story campaign. I finished it months ago. I think it took me about a month to play through the whole thing. It really is fantastic. I don't know why I'm telling you this. The people that watch my Red Dead Redemption videos already know how fantastic that game is, and most of you don't watch my Red Dead Redemption videos, but yeah, that's fine. It's only once a week, and the people who do watch them really, really enjoy watching them, so, you know, that's all good. Well, anyway, I need to think about putting this episode of Mingles with Jingles to bed because I've got some steaks in the boiler. Yeah, that's right. You heard me. What the hell? What is wrong with you, Jingles? Why would you boil a steak? Ah, well, you see. You've got Mr. Conway from Wargaming EU to blame for this. Way back last year, I think it was last year, it was when World of Warships' EU office was still actually based in Paris rather than Prague. When I turned up to do the space battle things dressed as an Imperial officer from Star Wars, Mr. Conway was going on and on and on about this fantastic new device for cooking meat. And basically it's kind of like a pressure cooker. Now, before all you Texans start organising yourselves into a lynch mob to string me up from the nearest lamppost for the crime of boiling a perfectly good steak, just bear with me. It's not quite that simple. The way it works, first you take your steak, or, you know, whatever piece of meat it is that you're cooking, in this case, a pair of steaks, and you pop them into these bags, which are then vacuum sealed. There's another device purely for doing that. Once all of the air has been sucked out of the bags and they've been sealed, you've then got the boiler. You top it up with water, you set the desired temperature depending on how well done you want your meat cooked. Once it reaches that temperature, you pop the bags into the water, you put the top on, and then you go away. Now there's a minimum length of time that the meat has to be cooking for, depending on whether you want it rare, medium, or well done. But there isn't really, you know, a maximum cooking time. It's never going to overcook. So, for example, you can pop your steaks into the cooker and then go away and do an episode of Mingles with Jingles. These steaks need to be cooked for a minimum of 2 hours, and it usually takes me at least 2 hours to do an episode of Mingles with Jingles. At least. The thing is, if I forget that the steaks are cooking, which has happened before when I've been doing a video, they're not going to overcook. It doesn't matter if it takes me 3 or 4 hours to do an episode of Mingles with Jingles, and then I suddenly think, oh crap, I've left the steaks in the cooker. Doesn't matter. They are never going to overcook. And you can put your seasoning straight into the bag with them. Bit of garlic butter, maybe some barbecue salt, you know, whatever. And it's going to completely... It's not like... You don't even have to leave the meat in a marinade for hours beforehand. You just put the marinade in the vacuum bag with the meat, and it cooks it into the meat as part of the process. And then once it's done, make sure you've got a really hot frying pan ready to go. Snip open the vacuum bags, take your cooked meat straight into the pan, add a little bit of seasoning if you have to, a couple of minutes on each side just to brown the surfaces off and really sear the meat closed, and bingo, perfectly cooked steaks every single time. Or so Mr. Conway assures me. He's been going on about this fantastic new cooking device of his for the best part of a year. And tonight, I'm going to get to put it to the test and actually see how it tastes. And right now, they've been cooking for about 2 hours, so I need to go and start the vegetables and, you know, all the other stuff that goes with it. Which means that's it for this week's episode of Mingles with Jingles. I hope you've enjoyed it. Well, maybe enjoyed isn't the right word when it comes to the part about swatting. You shouldn't have enjoyed that. You should have been horrified by that. But I hope you've at least been kept occupied and partially at least entertained for the best part of the last half hour, because we're done. That is it. Take care, and as always, I'll catch you next time.